The restaurant was quiet, soft music playing in the background.
Just look.
The smell of fresh coffee mixed with warm bread. Everyone seemed calm, enjoying their meals. But the moment he walked in, the whole room felt different. He was the kind of man who made people feel small just by looking at them. Expensive suit, shiny shoes, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The billionaire walked with confidence, as if the world belonged to him. Heads turned, whispers started. People recognized him, but most kept their distance. He spotted the waitress almost immediately. She was tall, strong, with bright eyes that could look right through anyone. She moved with grace, balancing plates effortlessly. But he didn't see that. He only saw her. And he didn't like what he saw. Who's in charge here? He asked loudly, his voice sharp and cold. I am, she replied calmly, without a trace of fear. He smirked, clearly enjoying this. Really? You? I was expecting someone less ordinary. His laugh echoed through the room. Some customers turned, shocked by his rudeness. The waitress didn't react. She just nodded, took his order, and went to prepare it. But he noticed something strange: her calmness. He didn't like it. Most people would have been nervous, scared, or trembling. But not her. Then he saw something that made him even more amused. A small girl sat in the corner, quietly watching everything. Her eyes followed every movement, every word, every expression. The billionaire's smirk grew. He loved to mock people, and this was the perfect target. He leaned slightly toward the waitress, lowering his voice but loud enough for others to hear. A deaf daughter, really? How do you even manage? Sounds difficult. The waitress froze for a second, but only slightly. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't move away. She just kept preparing the order. But the girl, her daughter, noticed every word. Her small hands clenched. She felt the sting of his arrogance. The billionaire laughed again, louder this time, enjoying the uncomfortable silence he created. People were staring. Some were whispering. The waitress kept working, but inside, a storm was brewing. She whispered under her breath, just enough for her daughter to hear. You'll see. He's about to regret this. The girl's eyes widened. She nodded slightly, her fingers twitching as if she had a secret plan. The billionaire, of course, didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying the power he thought he had. I hope you can handle the order. I don't like waiting. And don't mess it up. The waitress smiled, calm and polite, placing a plate on the table. It will be ready soon, sir. He snorted, clearly unimpressed, and turned to look around the room. But every table seemed to feel his arrogance. The customers were tense, and whispers grew. Some were trying not to laugh, some were shocked. Then, just before leaving the table, the waitress leaned slightly toward her daughter and mouthed something. The daughter's eyes sparkled with understanding. A plan had begun. The billionaire had no idea what was coming. As he walked away, still laughing to himself, the waitress stood tall. Her calm face hid her thoughts, but her eyes were sharp, full of fire. She knew exactly what she had to do. The camera could almost feel the tension. The room returned to its normal sounds, but the air was heavy. Everyone sensed that something big was about to happen. Something that would surprise even the arrogant billionaire. And the story had just begun. The restaurant's soft lights flickered as the evening settled in. The billionaire's laughter still echoed in the girl's mind. But she did not cry or look scared. Instead, she sat quietly, watching, observing, learning. Her name was Amara. Small, with soft curls framing her face, and eyes that seemed older than her age. People often underestimated her because she was quiet, because she didn't speak. But Amara had a secret. She understood everything around her. More than anyone could imagine. Her mother, the waitress, moved with elegance, attending to other customers while keeping an eye on Amara. The daughter could read lips. Every word the arrogant man had spoken, every sneer, every insult, it all belonged to her now. She memorized them, not out of fear, but as preparation, you know. Her mother whispered under her breath, leaning slightly toward her. He thinks he can humiliate us. But we are smarter than he imagines. Amara nodded slightly, her fingers twitching. She had a plan, a tiny spark of mischief and justice already forming in her mind. She could communicate silently with her mother, faster than anyone could notice. They didn't need words aloud. Their connection was almost magical, almost invisible. Meanwhile, the billionaire continued his arrogance. He ordered drinks, laughed at minor mistakes, and seemed to enjoy the attention. But he didn't notice the subtle glances between mother and daughter, the tiny signals, the silent language forming like a code. Amara observed everything. The way he tapped his expensive watch impatiently. The way his eyes scanned the restaurant for attention. Every reaction, every expression, she remembered. She could predict his moves, almost like a game. And in her mind, she already knew how to turn the game around. The mother caught Amara staring at the billionaire again. She smiled faintly, proud of her daughter's sharpness. Remember, he only sees what he wants. But we see everything, she whispered. Then came the moment that changed the energy in the room. The billionaire called for the check, pointing at her mother. Make it fast. I don't have time for your nonsense. Amara's eyes flickered with something electric, a quiet fire that even he could not see. Her fingers moved, almost imperceptibly, signaling a message to her mother. A plan was in motion, small but powerful. The mother continued her work calmly, but inside, her heart beat faster. She knew Amara's mind was racing. She had seen this before. Her daughter could take what others thought of as a disadvantage and turn it into strength. Silence was her weapon, observation her shield. Other customers barely noticed, but a subtle tension hung in the air. Something was different now. The arrogant billionaire might have wealth, power, and fame, but he didn't notice the force quietly building against him. Amara's secret was simple but dangerous. She understood people too well. She could read intentions, detect lies, and react faster than anyone imagined. And the most important thing, she never spoke aloud. To the world, she was quiet, invisible, but to her mother, she was a genius. The mother glanced at Amara one more time and nodded. That nod was enough. They were ready. Something was about to happen that would shock everyone, especially the billionaire. As the billionaire laughed and tapped his fingers on the table, he still thought he was untouchable. He had no idea that the quiet girl he had mocked was already planning a move that could freeze him in front of everyone. The restaurant continued its normal rhythm, but the air was charged. A storm was forming, silent but unstoppable. And it all started with the daughter, the one everyone ignored, the one he had mocked. The story was no longer just about arrogance. It was about intelligence, courage, and a quiet force ready to change everything. And Amara was ready to show the world sometimes the smallest voice could be the loudest. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversations and the clatter of cutlery. But for the billionaire, the world was all about himself. He leaned back in his chair, smirking, confident that he had already won. He didn't realize that the game had already begun. The waitress moved silently around the tables, taking orders, refilling drinks, but her eyes never left him. Every gesture, every smirk he made, every arrogant glance he threw around the room, she noticed. And her daughter Amara watched even more closely. "Mom," Amara signed quickly, her fingers moving with lightning speed. "He's careless. He's leaving something behind." The mother's eyes narrowed slightly. She nodded imperceptibly. Their plan was simple, subtle, and brilliant. No one else in the restaurant would notice. Only they could see it unfolding. The billionaire waved his hand, signaling the waitress. "You, hurry up with my order. And don't mess it up this time." His voice was dripping with impatience. The waitress smiled politely, setting the plate in front of him. She spoke in calm, measured tones. "Here's your order, sir. I hope you enjoy it." He snorted, picking up his fork with exaggerated care, pretending to be inspecting her work. But Amara was watching something he did not notice. A small, thin envelope had fallen from his pocket when he sat down. He hadn't realized it, too busy enjoying his power over others. "Mom," she sighed, pointing discreetly. "His secret." The waitress leaned slightly, eyes sharp. She picked up the envelope under the table while he was distracted. No one noticed. No one but her and Amara. The billionaire laughed, still oblivious. "You think you can impress me? You can't even talk properly." He mocked, thinking he was untouchable. The waitress placed the envelope on a tray and carried it to a nearby table, pretending it belonged to someone else. She didn't open it yet, but the seed of suspense had been planted. The billionaire's arrogance had created the first mistake. Amara's eyes gleamed with understanding. She whispered to her mother through a subtle sign, "We have him now." Meanwhile, the billionaire was ordering another round of drinks, completely unaware that his private notes that could ruin him if exposed, were in the hands of the very people he had mocked. He laughed at other customers, unaware that the attention was slowly shifting. The waitress returned to him, calm as ever, and cleared a plate. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. Every step, every small move, was part of a larger strategy. She had no intention of rushing. Patience was her weapon, observation her shield. Then came the subtle moment of suspense. The envelope sat quietly on the counter nearby, almost invisible. But to Amara, it was the key. She leaned forward slightly, pretending to play with her cup, yet watching every reaction of the billionaire. The camera of the mind could almost feel the tension in the room. Every tick of the clock echoed in silence. He thought he was in control. He thought he had the power. But the first move had been made. The invisible hand of justice was already on the board. The mother and daughter exchanged a glance. No words, just understanding. The billionaire had underestimated them. The first move was simple, yet dangerous. And now he had no idea what was coming next. The story was no longer just about arrogance or power. It was about patience, strategy, and intelligence. And the first move had set the stage for a lesson that the billionaire would never forget. The room continued its normal rhythm. But for those who could see, the tension was sharp. The game had begun. And the daughter, the one everyone ignored, had already started to turn the tables. The billionaire laughed again, completely unaware. But the pause in the air, the quiet electricity, hinted at what was about to happen. He was walking straight into a trap built with silence, intelligence, and courage. And the next move? It would shock him. The restaurant buzzed with chatter, but for the billionaire, it was all background noise. He was still laughing at his own jokes, completely confident that he was untouchable. He didn't notice the subtle glances being exchanged between the waitress and her daughter. Amara sat quietly, her eyes sharp and calculating. She had been observing him since the moment he walked in. Every movement, every smirk, every careless gesture was a clue. And now, it was time to turn those clues into action. Her mother, calm as ever, wiped a table nearby, pretending not to notice the envelope she had retrieved earlier. It contained private notes, details about a secret deal the billionaire had been planning. Information that, if revealed, could humiliate him in front of everyone. Amara leaned forward slightly, pretending to sip her drink, and whispered to her mother using sign language, "Now." The waitress nodded. She walked past the billionaire with a tray, carrying a small notebook that she had discreetly swapped with the envelope. She smiled politely, placing it on the table in front of him. "Sir, I think you dropped this," she said softly, her tone polite but firm. The billionaire looked down, confused. "That's mine?" he asked, scanning the notebook. He didn't notice the eyes around him, the subtle tension building. Amara's fingers moved quickly, signaling her mother to watch. She had memorized the exact contents of the notes and knew how to reveal them without saying a word. The waitress opened the notebook slightly, pretending to read it while serving another table. But she did it deliberately, letting the billionaire notice her reading. His smile faded. His eyes narrowed. He tried to snatch the notebook, but she held it with a calm strength that surprised him. What? What is this? He stammered, realizing that some of his private plans were now visible. The daughter, sitting quietly, made a subtle movement. She used her fingers to point toward a line in the notebook, then looked directly at her mother. The waitress understood instantly. It was time. Slowly, deliberately, she read aloud one of the notes, not the secret words, but the embarrassing truth hidden in the margins. The kind of detail that could ruin his image in front of everyone in the restaurant. She made it sound casual, as if she were just talking to herself, but the billionaire froze. His arrogance cracked. People around them started noticing the tension. Some whispered. Some leaned closer, curious about what had caused the sudden change in his expression. The billionaire's face turned red. He tried to regain his composure, but it was too late. The subtle power had shifted. The arrogance that had once filled the room was replaced by shock and fear. Amara, still silent, gave her mother a tiny smile. The first step of their plan had worked perfectly. The arrogant billionaire was beginning to realize that he had underestimated them, both of them. The waitress closed the notebook and returned to her work, calm as ever. But the damage was done. The twist had been delivered. The billionaire was frozen, unsure how to respond. While everyone else in the restaurant sensed something extraordinary had just happened, the camera of the mind could almost see the tension. The room had returned to normal, yet it wasn't normal. Something had shifted, and the billionaire now understood, in that sinking moment, that his arrogance could be challenged. Amara leaned back, eyes sparkling. She had been underestimated. But she had the upper hand, and the next move would take things even further. The mother gave her daughter a subtle nod. They had begun a game the billionaire could not control. And soon, the full truth would be revealed right in front of him, where everyone could see. The billionaire tried to laugh it off, but it was weak. Inside, he knew he had walked straight into a trap. And he had no idea how the next twist would hit him. The story was no longer just about arrogance. It was about cleverness, courage, and patience. And the twist had only just begun. The restaurant was packed, the soft clatter of dishes filling the air. But something had changed. The arrogant billionaire, who had once owned the room with his presence, now felt eyes on him. All around, whispers circulated. People were curious, sensing a storm in the making. He leaned back in his chair, trying to regain his confidence. "Everything perfect?" He asked the waitress, his voice loud, demanding. "Yes, sir," she replied, calm and polite. But behind her eyes, there was fire, a quiet, unstoppable force. Amara, sitting in the corner, studied him carefully. Her mother's subtle nod told her it was time. Time to expose the man who had mocked them. Time to make him face the consequences of his arrogance. The waitress walked to the center of the restaurant with her tray. She set it down deliberately, pretending it was a simple delivery, but all eyes turned toward her. Even the billionaire glanced up, sensing that something unusual was happening. Then, in a voice calm yet firm, she said aloud, "Sir, I believe you forgot something earlier." He looked confused. "Forgot something? What do you mean?" She held up the notebook, the one he had carelessly dropped. "These are your private notes, sir. Notes about your deals, your plans, and how you treat others." A hush fell over the restaurant. Customers leaned closer. Some whispered, others gasped. The billionaire's confident smirk faltered. Amara stood quietly, her eyes sharp, watching her mother. She signed quickly, subtly, to let her mother know which part to reveal next. The waitress flipped to a page and read one line aloud. Not harshly, not angrily, just clearly. The content was small but powerful, exposing his arrogance and selfishness. The room reacted immediately. People murmured, their expressions changing from curiosity to shock. The billionaire's face turned red. He tried to take the notebook, but she held it firmly. He stuttered, This is private." "Yes, sir," the waitress said, smiling politely. "Just like your words to me earlier. Private words. Shared too casually, perhaps." The room erupted. Customers began whispering, sharing glances. The billionaire's authority, his image of power, was crumbling right before everyone's eyes. He was frozen. People were seeing him not as a rich, untouchable man, but as someone arrogant, careless, and disrespectful. Amara's eyes shone. The silence of her presence spoke louder than any words could. She had never raised her voice, yet she had contributed to this moment in a way no one could ignore. She was the invisible force that had guided her mother, and now, the world saw the impact. The billionaire tried to laugh, a weak, hollow sound. But the energy of the room had shifted completely. His arrogance could no longer hide behind wealth or status. He was exposed. The waitress closed the notebook slowly and set it on the counter. "Sometimes, sir, respect is earned, not demanded," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "And arrogance is noticed by everyone, even the quiet ones." Amara smiled faintly, proud but quiet. The daughter who had been mocked for being silent had helped reveal the truth. Her mother had executed the plan flawlessly, but it was their teamwork, their silent understanding, that had shaken the billionaire. He sat frozen, unsure what to do next. Customers continued eating, but their glances kept returning to him. Some whispered their opinions. The arrogance he had worn like armor was gone, shattered by patience, intelligence, and courage. The mother looked at her daughter and nodded. The public exposure was complete, but the story wasn't over. The billionaire had been humbled, but the final lesson was yet to come. The moment that would leave him completely frozen. Realizing he had underestimated them both, the room returned to its soft rhythm, but the tension lingered. Everyone had witnessed something extraordinary. The arrogant billionaire had been exposed, and the quiet mother-daughter duo had done it without a single harsh word. Using only cleverness, courage, and subtle strategy, the stage was set for the next move. The confrontation that would finally teach him the lesson he deserved. The restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm, but the tension hung like a thick cloud. The arrogant billionaire still sat at his table, trying to act normal, but his hands trembled slightly. He could feel the eyes of everyone around him, judging, whispering, noticing. His confidence, once unshakable, was beginning to crack. The waitress approached him again, calm and collected, carrying only a glass of water. But this time, her purpose was clear. She was no longer serving food. She was serving justice. "Sir," she began softly, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the room, "you mocked my daughter today. You laughed at her silence, her struggle. And yet, you forgot that silence can speak louder than arrogance." The billionaire's eyes widened. He tried to interrupt, but she raised a finger slightly, signaling that she was not finished. Amara, sitting quietly in the corner, stood up slowly. Her small hands moved gracefully, signing words her mother had taught the staff to understand. The staff watched, surprised, realizing the story of her silence and intelligence. Even some customers leaned forward, sensing the climax was approaching. The mother continued, looking directly at the billionaire. "You mocked her because she couldn't hear you. But she understood everything. Every insult, every sneer. She noticed it all. And she taught me how to handle arrogance like yours." The billionaire froze. He had expected many things, mockery, excuses, even defiance, but not this. He had not prepared for a confrontation led by a quiet child and her poised mother. The words sank in, slow but heavy, echoing in his mind. Amara stepped closer, signing rapidly and clearly, letting the mother interpret to the room. Every gesture carried meaning, every movement deliberate. "You think money makes you powerful," the mother said aloud, "but it does not give you respect. You cannot buy dignity nor the right to humiliate others." The billionaire's face turned pale. His mouth opened, closed, and opened again. Words failed him. He had faced boardrooms, lawsuits, critics, but never this. Never the courage and cleverness of someone he had dismissed as powerless. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the restaurant. Customers, once observers, now became witnesses to the billionaire's unraveling. He looked around, suddenly aware that he was exposed not just to his mistakes, but to the intelligence and unity of a mother and daughter. "Some lessons," the waitress continued, her voice calm but filled with authority, "cannot be taught with money. Some lessons," she paused, letting the weight sink in, "can only be learned with humility." Amara's eyes met her mother's. The silent signal was clear. The confrontation had reached its peak. The billionaire's arrogance, the weapon he had relied on for so long, had been stripped away. He was frozen not physically, but mentally, trapped in the truth he had ignored. Customers whispered, some nodded, some shook their heads in disbelief. The billionaire shifted in his seat, trying to reclaim control, but it was gone. The quiet girl, the composed waitress, had shown him that power is not always visible, and that underestimating others can be a dangerous mistake. The mother stepped back, letting Amara finish the final gesture. The daughter signed one last phrase, her small hands precise, confident. The interpretation reached the billionaire loud and clear. "Never underestimate those you think are weak. Respect is earned, not demanded." The billionaire sat frozen, unable to speak. He had been humiliated, humbled, and enlightened all at the same time. The mother and daughter exchanged a small, knowing smile. Their confrontation was complete. The room slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the impact lingered. Every person who had witnessed it understood. Arrogance can be defeated by intelligence, courage, and unity. And the billionaire? He had learned a lesson he would never forget. The restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere was different now. The once arrogant billionaire sat at his table, frozen, humbled, and stripped of his arrogance. His wealth and power had done nothing to protect him from the lesson, delivered by a quiet girl and her courageous mother. Amara, small but powerful in presence, sat back in her chair. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of pride and calm. She had remained silent throughout, yet her actions had spoken louder than any words. Every glance, every gesture had led to this moment. She had shown that intelligence and courage could triumph over arrogance. Her mother, standing tall, adjusted her apron with a subtle smile. She had handled the confrontation flawlessly, guiding her daughter while keeping her own composure. Together, they had exposed the billionaire's mistakes without raising their voices in anger. The lesson had been clear. Respect is earned, not demanded. The billionaire slowly rose from his chair, looking around at the customers who had witnessed the scene. Their expressions were a mix of admiration and disbelief. Some whispered to each other, nodding knowingly. He swallowed hard, his pride crushed, and finally spoke in a quiet, broken tone. I am sorry." The apology was genuine, yet it carried the weight of embarrassment. He had mocked a deaf child, underestimated the mother, and revealed the fragility of his arrogance to everyone present. And now he could do nothing but accept the consequences of his actions. Amara's mother nodded slowly, acknowledging the apology without showing any triumph. "It takes courage to admit mistakes," she said softly, "and wisdom to respect those who are different from you." The billionaire looked at Amara, finally noticing her presence fully for the first time. The girl who had been silent, who had observed everything, was now the center of his attention. He realized that he had underestimated her entirely, and that mistake had cost him dearly. Amara gave a small, confident smile. She didn't need to speak. Her eyes said it all. She had proven that silence was not weakness. It was power, patience, and understanding. The restaurant patrons began to applaud quietly, some cheering, some nodding in respect. The duo had not only humbled the billionaire, but they had also inspired everyone present. People realized that strength comes in many forms, and that courage and intelligence often hide behind quiet faces. The mother and daughter exchanged a glance. Their mission was complete. They had faced arrogance, outsmarted it, and remained true to themselves. They had turned a moment of insult into a lesson for everyone in the room, especially for the man who thought money could solve everything. The billionaire, still seated, looked at them one last time. There was humility in his gaze now, and perhaps a newfound respect. He had learned that no amount of wealth could replace humanity, patience, and respect. Amara reached for her mother's hand, and together, they walked toward the exit. The restaurant seemed brighter, almost as if the air itself had shifted. The lesson was over, the tension released. And the audience, both in the restaurant and watching the story unfold, felt a sense of closure. As they left, Amara whispered to her mother, signing silently. "We did it." Her mother squeezed her hand, replying, "Yes, my love." And no one will ever forget this lesson. The billionaire remained at his table, silent and reflective, realizing that some moments cannot be bought or controlled. And the mother-daughter duo, once underestimated, had walked away victorious, proof that intelligence, courage, and unity could triumph over arrogance and cruelty. The story ended not with anger, but with respect earned, lessons learned, and the quiet power of a mother and her daughter shining brighter than any wealth in the world.